And welcome to another live edition of What Catholics Believe. I'm your host, Thomas Nagley. With me tonight is Father William White, the traditional Catholic priest of the Society of St. Pius V. He's also the pastor of Immaculate Conception Church right here in Norwood, Ohio. As well.
Well, as a matter of fact, it has to do with a comment that I did receive, not through the emails, but another way. Someone pointed out, a friend, very good friend of theirs, made the observation that the traditional Catholics have some very good points, but all of those good points are undermined by the fact that traditional Catholics do not recognize any living authority on earth to interpret and to explain Catholic teaching. Which I thought was interesting because, well, it's not true, number one, but I think what they're talking about is that in practice, traditional Catholics do not recognize Francis as being a reliable, if not even authoritative, interpreter of Catholic teaching. But the odd thing is that the person who brought this to my attention has already told me that the person who made the comment doesn't really put much stock in Francis either. And so my question back to the questioner was, well, you find fault with traditional Catholics because we find fault with Francis and do not find that he is a reliable and even in many cases don't believe he's an authoritative interpreter and representative of Catholic teaching. And I would ask that individual, well, do you consider Francis to be a reliable, authoritative representative of Catholic teaching? Do you actually consider that? And I understand that he actually doesn't consider them, Francis. So my point would be, well, if you don't, you may consider Francis to be an authoritative, to be in a position of authority to represent and teach Catholic, explain Catholic teaching. But I think you've made it rather clear by what you've said that he certainly is not a reliable teacher of Catholic doctrine. So what distinguishes you from any other, anyone who says we cannot follow Francis in what he says, because he's not actually speaking as a Catholic teacher? Mm-hmm. So I tend to think that the person who actually originated the question is a lot closer to our understanding of things than he realizes. Because I really doubt that he would say, well, yes, I consider Francis to be a reliable and true teacher of the Catholic faith. As it says in the Canon of the Mass, that we remember all of those and we're in union and communion with all of those who are true teachers of the Catholic faith. Mm-hmm. I doubt that this individual actually considers Francis any more than you and I do to be a reliable teacher of the Catholic faith. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was kind of a curious comeback, But anyway, maybe we'll hear from them and find out.
Mm-hmm. Father, that's definitely not an anomaly in the Novus Ordo where we see people who, will criticize us for not accepting the Pope, so-called, but yet they themselves, so many of them do not even follow the teachings of the Catholic Church. And I mean, I guess it makes perfect sense because that's what we get with Francis himself in the hierarchy, where they, kind of maintain this thing. Everything that the Pope says is magisterial, and infallible. We have to follow it, and yet the man himself doesn't even follow some of the things that he himself says, but definitely doesn't follow Catholic teaching. So I think we see that kind of dissonance a lot.
There certainly is a disorder there. There's no doubt about it. In fact, if you have a sea captain, I mean, recently we had St. Peter's boat on the Sea of Galilee, tossed by the waves and contrary winds and all the rest, and our Lord walking by in the darkness of the night on the water, right? And we talk about the bark of Peter, Barque, the bark of Peter. And if you had like the actual ship of the church, represented by that bark of Peter, established by our Lord Jesus Christ, which we do, it's exactly who established the church, and he gave the church its destination and he assigned to the church the course it must follow. But if you find that someone has now taken over the ship and has declared a different destination and changed the course, you would think that the ship had been pirated. You'd think that the ship had been hijacked, and it has been. In fact, if Francis can be considered like the pirate pope, of the Novus Ordo, wants to change the destination of the church, the purpose of its foundation and launching by our Lord, and change the course of the ship, change its itinerary, as it were, to his own liking, in a very worldly sense. In fact, one might even regard him and the modern hierarchy as shills of the New World Order, because they're pushing all of the New World Order agenda. Anyway, that takes us a little bit far afield here, but I thought that one comment that I got back was of interest, because it seems that there's a certain amount of confusion in people who say, well, the traditionalists have good points, but they still don't have a living voice to guide them in the understanding of the Catholic faith. And then when you ask them, well, do you consider Francis to be an authentic guide and teacher of the Catholic faith, they would say, well, no. And so you would ask them, well, who is your living voice that you look to? Well, the Pope. And, well, do you consider Francis the Pope? Well, yes, we do. Well, okay, but is he truly a reliable, living voice of the Catholic faith, the teachings of the Catholic Church? Well, no. And you go around and around and around like that in kind of